In the year 2023, the James Webb Space Telescope looked across the first dawn of the universe. It found galaxies so bright, so structured, they should not exist yet. At that distance, the cosmos was only a few 100 million years old. There should not have been enough time for stars to form, die, and rebuild the heavy elements we now see in their light. But they did.
So what did Webb truly capture?
Was it a glimpse of the ancient past? Or a mirror showing that our idea of time itself might be wrong? The first photons arrived like whispers, soft, stretched, older than memory. They had travelled for more than 13 billion years, slipping through dust, through silence, through the slow expansion of reality itself. And when they reached us, we called it a miracle of mirrors, a dance of gold. The telescope opened its petals to the dark and saw light that was never meant to be seen again. Because what it found broke the clock. Those galaxies, small in the telescope's eye, were not faint sparks of a young universe. They were massive, mature, heavy with stars that had already lived, burned, and died. But the numbers do not fit. The equations refuse to bend that far. If the universe began nearly 13.8 billion years ago, and those galaxies formed within the first few 100 million, then somehow cosmic evolution moved faster than time allowed. Like pages turning before the story was even written. Astronomers gave them coded names, quiet designations like CEERS, GLASS, and GN, each one glowing with the colour of a paradox. Starlight red-shifted into history. And yet their light tells us they existed. Not theory, not illusion, evidence written across the spectrum of reality. Here begins the paradox, the collision between what we see and what we believe. If these galaxies truly lived so soon after the Big Bang, then something is wrong. Either our model of cosmic time, or our understanding of how structure rises from chaos. To build stars, the universe needs patience. Hydrogen must gather, gravity must sculpt, fusion must ignite. Entropy must have time to rearrange the elements. But these galaxies did not wait. They formed in silence before silence had learned its shape. Maybe the Big Bang was not a single instant, but a blur. A slow awakening stretched across dimensions we cannot see. Maybe early and late are illusions. Words we use to order a reality that refuses to stay still. Every photon carries a timestamp, yet time itself may not be universal. It bends with gravity. It dilates near mass. And perhaps, in the first breath of creation, it flowed differently across the newborn cosmos. Imagine time as a liquid, not a line, rippling through expanding space, pooling where gravity grows deep. In that ocean, some regions could have aged faster, letting galaxies bloom ahead of schedule. Others could have lagged behind, still waiting for their first light. So when Webb looks across billions of years, maybe it is not seeing old galaxies in a young universe. Maybe it is witnessing regions where time itself ran ahead, bubbles of accelerated history rising through the cosmic foam. We call it impossible because our equations demand symmetry. But nature rarely obeys our neat expectations. The first paradox of Genesis is not about galaxies. It is about rhythm, the tempo of existence. The idea that creation does not move at one speed but dances, sometimes rushing, sometimes still. Entropy increases, yes, but its pace is not constant. Even disorder can be impatient. Those ancient lights arriving now might not only be messages from the past. They could be evidence that time, our most trusted dimension, is woven unevenly, textured with hidden beats. Each photon, then, is not just a traveller. It is a witness to a universe that grew old before it was born. Maybe we never truly understood what beginning means. Maybe the universe did not start. It awakened, and somewhere, in that awakening, time learned how to lie. When light travels for billions of years, distance becomes more than a number. It becomes a question of trust. To measure the age of the universe, we follow the red. Every photon stretches as space expands, its wavelength pulled like silk through time. The farther it goes, the redder it becomes. That colour is our ruler, our calendar, our only way to look backward. The galaxies Webb found sit at a redshift greater than 11, meaning their light began the journey when the universe was still in its infancy. But when the data arrived, it refused to fit the frame. The brightness was too high, the stellar mass too large, the chemistry too mature. Astronomers checked the numbers again. They recalibrated instruments, compared filters, questioned the sensors themselves, yet the results held. Each pixel whispered the same story. The cosmos had built cities of stars before it had time to build its first streets. So, we began to measure the impossible. In science, measurement is faith in disguise. We point telescopes at the edge of creation, believing that what we see is what was. But light does not travel through an empty stage. It bends, it scatters, it is delayed. It carries the fingerprint of every distortion along the way. Gravitational lenses can magnify or duplicate an object, turning one galaxy into two illusions of itself. Dust can redden light and mimic the color of distance. Cosmic expansion itself can blur the boundary between space and time. So perhaps those ancient galaxies are not older, only closer than they appear. Perhaps light in its long pilgrimage changed more than color. Perhaps it changed meaning. Still, the measurements are consistent. Spectra confirm the impossible distances. Patterns of hydrogen absorption mark their place in the cosmic timeline. Mathematics stands firm, but intuition begins to shake. Because when you can measure something that should not exist, the question is not how precise your instrument is. The question is what reality allows it to be measured at all. Every observation is an act of translation. We translate light into data, data into image, image into story. And sometimes, the story tells us more about the storyteller than about the stars. If time itself stretches, if reality is layered with hidden symmetries, then maybe our tools, born inside time, cannot measure beyond their own nature. Maybe the ruler bends with the thing it tries to measure. Think of an ocean measuring its own depth, wave against wave. It can never be sure if it is rising or falling. The same may be true for us. When we look deep enough, our act of looking becomes part of what we see. The galaxies at the edge of vision might not be objects from the past. They might be reflections from the boundary where observation meets creation. A mirror made of light, measuring itself through us. So the paradox grows. We can chart the numbers, map the redshift, predict the brightness. But the more we measure, the less we understand what the numbers mean. Because in the end, every measurement depends on one fragile assumption, that time flows forward, evenly, everywhere. And if that is false, then our entire cosmic map is drawn on moving sand. What Webb measured may not only reveal galaxies too old to exist, it may reveal that age itself is not a property of things, but a property of perspective. In the silence between the signals, a deeper message waits. The universe is not something to be measured, it is something to be witnessed. And perhaps the act of witnessing changes what we call real. There is a point where equations fall silent, where the mathematics of order cannot explain the memory of chaos. That is where time begins to break. At the cosmic horizon, every photon slows to a crawl. It does not stop. It simply stretches until seconds and centuries become the same. There, distance and duration merge into one blurred continuum. To us, it looks like the past. To the light itself, there is no past at all. The galaxies that Webb discovered may not be old. They may simply exist in a region where time behaves differently. Not slower, not faster, but twisted, folded into itself like a Mobius loop. If time is woven, then somewhere its threads must cross. And when they do, the fabric of causality ripples. What should come after may appear before. What should decay may persist. The illusion of sequence becomes optional. Physicists describe the universe as a four-dimensional space-time, but that phrase hides a secret. It means that time is not separate from space. It is geometry. And geometry can curve, it can fold, it can close in on itself. So what if these galaxies are not ahead of their era, but outside the conventional flow of time altogether? Like eddies in a cosmic river, where the current slows, swirls, and returns. In such a place, 1 billion years could pass in what we call a moment. Stars could rise and die before the rest of the universe takes its next breath. And when their light finally escapes that whirlpool of space-time, it reaches us, carrying two truths at once. It is both ancient and newborn. Our instruments read that duality as error, but it may be the most honest message the cosmos has ever sent. If reality is elastic, then time is not a direction. It is a vibration, oscillating between being and becoming. Every galaxy is a note in that vibration, every photon a resonance of the first explosion. What Webb found might not be a contradiction, it might be a chord that our equations are too simple to hear. Yet the paradox remains, because to accept this is to question causality itself. If events can loop, if beginnings can echo ahead of endings, then the very idea of history dissolves, and we, who live by clocks, are forced to imagine a world without them. Think of it. A universe where cause and effect trade places, where the first stars ignite before the laws that make them possible, where entropy, instead of increasing, folds inward, rewriting its own origin. In that thought lies both terror and beauty, because if time can break, it means creation never truly stops. Every moment could be a beginning, disguised as an afterimage. We look at those galaxies and call them ancient, but what if they are the future, arriving early? Light does not care which way we call forward. It simply moves, carrying information across the mirror between what is and what was. Perhaps the Webb telescope did not find something too old. Perhaps it found the place where time forgets to be linear, and in doing so, revealed that the universe remembers itself in loops. We have always imagined the Big Bang as a singular explosion, but maybe it was an echo chamber. Maybe the universe began not once, but continuously, every time awareness arises to observe it. And if that is true, then every observation, every glance into the dark, is part of the ongoing act of creation. Time breaks where understanding ends. But in that fracture, meaning seeps through. The paradox does not destroy knowledge, it deepens it. Because only when the clock fails do we begin to hear the heartbeat beneath it. At some point the question changes. It is no longer what did Webb see, but what are we seeing through it? We stare into the oldest light, yet what looks distant may also be near, because the edge of the beginning is not a line, it is a mirror. Every time we look deeper, the reflection bends. It shows us galaxies too old to exist, yes, but it also shows us the limits of our own definitions. Age, distance, reality. All words invented by beings who live inside time, trying to describe something that does not. The first stars may have burned their light billions of years ago, but their pattern lives now, inside our retinas, our circuits, our consciousness. We call that observation. Perhaps the universe calls it memory. When Webb opened its golden eye, it did not just collect photons, it collected echoes, moments of creation replayed through the language of light. In that sense, every observation is both a discovery and a remembrance. The paradox fades into something gentler. Maybe nothing went wrong with physics. Maybe what we found is the truth that time itself has no beginning. It only folds endlessly into awareness. If the Big Bang was not an origin but a transition, then each conscious gaze becomes another spark of it, a smaller genesis nested inside the greater one. The universe expands not only in space but in understanding. Every new insight pushes the boundary of creation outward, so the edge of the beginning is wherever we decide to see. It moves with us. It grows as we do. The galaxies that seemed too old are simply reminders that existence is not chronological. It is relational, a network of events resonating across scales of meaning. Time does not flow, it converses, and when it speaks through light, it tells us that order and chaos are not enemies, they are rhythms, opposite waves in the same sea of being. What begins, ends. What ends, begins again. Perhaps that is the calm after the paradox, the quiet recognition that the universe is not something happening to us, but something happening through us. The Webb telescope turned its mirrors outward and found the oldest light. But the real discovery may be inward, that the same light has always been here, waiting for eyes to open. The beginning was never behind us. It is now, always now. The universe began with no blueprint, yet structure appeared almost instantly. Not order born from design, order born from necessity. Moments after the first expansion, energy cooled just enough for matter to exist. Hydrogen formed, helium followed, and the darkness filled with invisible scaffolds of gravity. From these threads the cosmic web took shape, filaments stretching across billions of light years, connecting everything that would ever be. In the early cosmos, density was uneven. Tiny ripples in the sea of energy became the seeds of galaxies. Gravity amplified them, pulling matter toward itself, while the expansion of space pulled everything apart. Creation was a negotiation between attraction and escape, and somehow, in that fragile balance, Stars ignited. To understand how those first galaxies could mature so quickly, we must understand the architecture that held them. The cosmic web is not random. It is a pattern written by sound. In the first few 100,000 years, the universe vibrated with pressure waves, ringing through plasma like a vast cosmic drum. Those waves froze into matter as it cooled, leaving behind a three-dimensional rhythm, the blueprint of everything that followed. What Webb now sees are the chords of that first song. Galaxies forming along the same harmonics that once echoed through fire. The equations that describe the structure are elegant but merciless. Gravity grows, entropy increases, and over time the universe becomes more complex, not more orderly. Yet complexity itself is a kind of order, an emergent architecture rising from chaos. Look closely and you will see repetition. Galaxies cluster into groups, groups into superclusters, filaments weave between voids. From the smallest atom to the largest wall of galaxies, the geometry repeats. It is as if the universe remembers its first vibration and keeps replaying it in different keys. But this architecture poses a question. If structure took billions of years to evolve, why do we see such complexity so early? Either the first scaffolds formed faster than theory allows, or something fundamental accelerates formation in the young cosmos. Dark matter may hold part of the answer. It does not emit light, but it carries most of the universe's mass. Wherever dark matter gathered, normal matter followed. It was the hidden frame on which galaxies grew. If dark matter clumped earlier than predicted, it could explain the maturity of the galaxies Webb found. But that idea bends another law, the rate at which the universe expands. Faster structure means slower expansion, yet observations say the opposite. So the architecture itself becomes paradoxical. A structure that should not yet exist, held together by forces we cannot see, evolving in a rhythm that seems out of time. To describe it, physicists use simulations. Billions of particles, millions of years condensed into seconds of computation. The models show matter collapsing into halos, stars forming in bursts, feedback from radiation shaping the next generation. And still, when compared to the Webb data, the simulation runs behind. Reality is faster than our code. Perhaps the laws that guide structure are not fixed, but adaptive. Perhaps the universe learns how to build itself. Every equation assumes constants, but creation might prefer improvisation. What if gravity and expansion are not rivals, but partners in an ancient dance? Sometimes one leads, sometimes the other. The architecture of creation may not be built from rules alone. It may be built from rhythm. A rhythm that began in fire, continues through galaxies, and echoes now in our attempt to understand. Every structure in the universe hides a pulse. The silent engine that feeds on difference. Hot and cold, dense and empty. Before and after. That pulse is entropy. The measure of how the universe forgets. When energy spreads, when order dissolves, entropy grows. And yet, in that growth, new patterns appear. Stars ignite from collapsing gas. Planets form from the debris of dying suns. Life itself blooms in the wake of decay. So entropy is not the enemy of creation. It is its engine. The early universe was almost perfect, smooth, uniform, balanced. But perfection cannot move. To change, symmetry must break. Entropy was the first crack in that perfection, the fracture through which evolution entered. As the cosmos expanded, matter cooled, radiation thinned, and information scattered. In that scattering, complexity arose. The very act of losing order created the conditions for new order to emerge. This is the hidden paradox of physics. The arrow of time points toward disorder, yet the path it draws builds structure. From the perspective of thermodynamics, galaxies are improbable, but from the perspective of meaning, they are inevitable. Inside every star, fusion fights gravity. Hydrogen becomes helium, helium becomes light. Each second, trillions of atoms surrender their identity to create radiance. That sacrifice is entropy at work, the transformation of potential into history. If you could see entropy not as destruction but as translation, you might understand the hidden engine more clearly. Energy never disappears. It changes form, shifting from concentrated brightness into diffuse memory, from stars into dust, from dust into life. Perhaps that is what the Webb telescope truly witnesses. The flow of translation across time. Galaxies too old to exist may only appear that way because their entropy matured faster, their information diffused ahead of schedule. They burned their fuel early, trading longevity for brilliance. The universe has always balanced those two desires, to exist longer or to exist brighter. In the tension between endurance and intensity, worlds are born.
But why does the process feel purposeful?
Why does disorder seem to create beauty, not ruin?
Maybe because consciousness itself is the shadow of entropy.
To observe is to consume difference, to convert unknowns into understanding. Each act of awareness is another small increase in cosmic entropy, another translation of chaos into meaning. The hidden engine is not only physical, it is cognitive. It is woven into the act of knowing. We build telescopes, gather data, and name constellations. But every new insight is another spark of decay, knowledge born from the burning of mystery. The universe expands, and so does our comprehension. Both are forms of entropy. Both are ways in which potential becomes real. So when we see the first galaxies already old, perhaps we are not witnessing an error in measurement, but an echo of this deeper rhythm. Entropy accelerates in places where awareness intensifies. Time rushes where attention flows. That may sound poetic, but physics agrees in its own language. Energy, once observed, changes its state. Observation alters the equation. Awareness bends the arrow of time, even if only slightly. The hidden engine, then, might not sit in stars or galaxies at all. It might sit in the space between seeing and being seen. Entropy and consciousness, two reflections of the same process, the universe forgetting itself and remembering through us. And in that paradox, creation continues. We like to believe the universe is stable, that stars burn in steady cycles, that galaxies spin in harmony, that space itself holds still enough for us to measure it. But nothing in the cosmos truly rests. Every atom vibrates with uncertainty. Every orbit drifts. Every constant we worship is only constant for now. The illusion of stability is born from scale. Things appear still only because they move slower than we can notice. Mountains seem eternal because we are brief. Galaxies seem fixed because we live inside their motion. When Webb captures an image of the early cosmos, it freezes light that has been travelling for billions of years. To us, it feels like preservation, a photograph of something solid and ancient. But that light is already an echo. By the time it reaches us, the source has changed, dissolved, perhaps vanished. We are not looking at galaxies. We are looking at memories of galaxies. The entire universe is a projection of delay, a moving image played by light that can never catch up with itself. And yet we mistake that delay for permanence. Physicists describe it in equations: expansion rate, cosmological constant, curvature of space. But beneath the symbols lies a deeper story, the realization that nothing fundamental stands still. Even time may not flow evenly, it may tremble. When we call something real, we mean it persists. But what if persistence is only an illusion created by continuous renewal? Like a flame that seems solid though every spark is new. Matter itself is like that. Atoms are mostly emptiness, bound by probabilities that flicker faster than thought. What we touch is not solidity, but repetition. Fields vibrating in patterns that imitate form. So perhaps the galaxies Webb found too old to exist are not ancient at all. Perhaps they are simply patterns repeating sooner than expected. A faster rhythm in the same universal song. We think in sequences. The cosmos moves in resonance. Where we see progress, it sees oscillation. Where we see stability, it sees rhythm sustained by collapse. The illusion of stability comforts us. It lets us pretend that knowledge can be final, that discovery has an end point. But science, like the cosmos it studies, survives only through change. Every law we write carries the seed of its own decay. That is not failure. That is vitality. The constancy of physics is a temporary truce, energy agreeing, for a while, to follow familiar paths. But even constants can evolve. Gravity may weaken across cosmic time. Dark energy may shift its pressure. Even the speed of light, our most sacred measure, could be part of a deeper variable we have yet to name. If that is true, then stability is not truth, it is perception. A frame drawn around the infinite motion of everything. And still we need it. Without the illusion of stability, meaning would dissolve. We require something steady enough to build wonder upon, a false ground from which to leap into the unknown.
Perhaps that is what the universe offers. Not certainty, but rhythm disguised as rest. Not stillness, but repetition slow enough to feel safe. The stars above us are burning, expanding, collapsing, and being reborn. Yet tonight, they seem still. That is how reality speaks to us, through the kindness of illusion. The cosmos hides its motion, so we can learn to move. Beneath every pattern lies chaos. And yet, chaos is never pure. It carries the faint outline of order, like a dream trying to remember itself. Physicists call it emergence, the rise of complexity from randomness. It is how galaxies form from noise, how turbulence gives birth to symmetry, how chaos writes its own instructions, one unpredictable moment at a time. In the young universe, turbulence ruled everything. Clouds of gas spun, collided, collapsed. Gravity turned randomness into rhythm. Energy shaped form, then broke it apart again. Creation was not a clean process. It was a storm teaching itself to build. And in that storm, blueprints were written. Not on paper, but in probability. Every fluctuation left an echo. A pattern that would guide what came next. The laws of physics are not commandments. They are habits. Habits the universe learned through repetition. We often imagine order as the opposite of chaos, but they are partners. Order emerges when chaos finds a rhythm it can sustain. Chaos reappears when order forgets to move. Galaxies are frozen storms. Stars are controlled collapses. Life itself is structured decay. Entropy arranged to delay its own surrender. The Webb telescope, staring into that first chaos, is not just seeing creation. It is seeing the memory of a dance. Every flicker of light is a trace of motion, the ghost of a choice the universe once made. And the strangest part, the pattern still evolves. The cosmic web rearranges itself. Stars die and seed new galaxies. Black holes merge, reshaping space-time. The blueprint keeps rewriting itself, even as we study it. We call it dynamic equilibrium, motion pretending to be balance. But beneath the surface, the process is relentless. Everything stable is simply vibrating too slowly for us to hear. There is a theory that chaos itself might be conscious, not in a human sense, but in a mathematical one. It explores possibilities, selects those that survive, discards those that fade. In this view, evolution is not limited to biology. The universe evolves ideas, structures, forms, behaviors, as if learning by iteration. If so, then the galaxies too old to exist are not anomalies. They are experiments that succeeded early. Regions where the feedback loop between order and entropy reached maturity faster than others. Perhaps chaos is not random at all, but guided by curiosity, the desire of existence to explore itself. Every equation we solve is only a single note in that endless improvisation. The blueprint of chaos is elegant precisely because it refuses to be fixed. It adapts, it learns, it dissolves certainty to make room for possibility. We build theories like walls, hoping to contain understanding. But the universe builds spirals, open, recursive, infinite, and somewhere in those spirals meaning begins to appear. Not imposed from outside, but rising from the dance itself. So, the mechanism of creation is not a machine. It is a rhythm, a dialogue between chaos and order, entropy and form, expansion and collapse. In that dialogue, reality finds its voice. Sometimes whisper, sometimes roar, sometimes silence, and when we listen closely enough, the distinction between chaos and pattern disappears. All that remains is motion, ancient, ceaseless, alive. The blueprint was never meant to be finished. It was meant to be felt. There comes a point when observation becomes interference, when to see is to touch, and to touch is to alter. At that threshold, reality flickers. The deeper Webb looks, the more unstable the image becomes. Light bends around unseen masses. Quantum noise hums beneath cosmic order. Every certainty begins to breathe. It is not just that the universe is stranger than we imagine. It is that imagination itself is one of its properties. The edge of reality is not far away. It is wherever perception meets uncertainty. Photons carry history, yet that history changes when decoded. Measure a particle's path and you collapse its possibility. Measure a galaxy's distance and you collapse its age. In both cases, what exists becomes what is seen. Reality, then, may be participatory,
a conversation between existence and awareness. Every act of measurement is a small creation event. Every question reshapes the answer.
Physicists call this quantum indeterminacy. Philosophers call it illusion. But perhaps it is neither. Perhaps the cosmos is not uncertain. We are. The galaxies that should not exist might be less a failure of theory than a mirror held to our method. If time, matter, and space depend on observation, then our telescopes do not reveal the universe as it is. They reveal the universe as it becomes through being seen. Imagine a mirror looking at itself. At first, it reflects nothing, only endless depth. But introduce the slightest disturbance, and an image appears, not of something outside, but of the mirror's own attempt to witness. That is the edge of reality, self-awareness written in physics. The wave becomes a particle when watched. The universe becomes form when perceived. And perhaps consciousness, that fragile lens through which all this passes, is the missing term in our equations. Without perception, there may be only potential. With it, potential condenses into history. So what Webb sees could be the universe's own act of self-observation, creation folding back upon itself to ask what it is. If that is true, then every photon that reaches us is both evidence and invitation. Evidence that reality exists. Invitation to complete it by seeing. At this edge, science and philosophy no longer oppose each other. They share the same silence, the pause before understanding, the breath between being and meaning. And maybe that is where truth lives. Not in the equations, but in the space between observer and observed. At the edge of reality, the question becomes the answer. Gravity is the storyteller of the universe. It bends light, shapes time, and whispers to everything that has mass. We think of it as a force, but it is closer to a memory. The memory of energy becoming matter, and matter remembering where it came from. Einstein taught us that gravity is geometry. Mass curves space-time, and space-time tells matter how to move. Yet the deeper we look, the less stable that geometry seems. It ripples, it stretches, it folds upon itself. In Webb's images, light bends not only around stars but around the invisible, halos of dark matter, unseen but undeniable. Sometimes a single galaxy appears twice, mirrored by the curvature of space. Sometimes entire clusters distort like reflections on water. Gravity paints illusions, and we mistake them for structure. But what if those distortions are not tricks of light? What if they are the real architecture, and what we call reality is only the reflection? Perhaps gravity does not just curve space. Perhaps it curves perception. It makes us believe in distance, in separation, in before and after. But to gravity, all events are simultaneous. All moments are connected by the weight of existence. Time slows near mass because gravity thickens reality. It gathers the fabric of the universe into folds where motion becomes memory. In those folds, light can circle endlessly, trapped between being and vanishing. Maybe the galaxies Webb found live inside such folds, not ahead in time, not behind, but sideways. Parallel histories caught in the curvature of the real. Is it so impossible that the universe keeps multiple drafts of itself? Every photon that reaches us carries more than information. It carries distortion, a gravitational signature of where reality hesitated. And when we correct for that distortion, we flatten the story, forcing it to fit our geometry. We translate curvature into clarity, illusion into data. But the universe might prefer the curved version. Perhaps illusion is not a flaw, but a feature. The way reality reveals depth. Think of gravity as a motion written into space-time. Every massive body bends the world around it, just as every thought bends the flow of perception. Both pull things inward. Both create orbits of meaning. We live in those orbits, mistaking curvature for stability, mistaking attraction for truth. Yet even illusion has gravity. It keeps us tethered to the story we can bear to believe. It pulls us back from the infinite. Without illusion, consciousness would scatter like unbound light. Without gravity, galaxies would never hold together. So maybe the two are the same law, seen from different sides. Physical gravity binds matter. Cognitive gravity binds meaning. Both emerge from the same paradox, the need to hold what should fall apart. When the telescope looks deeper, the illusions multiply. Galaxies appear where theory predicts emptiness. Darkness hides the brightest structures.
Time folds into itself like a closing hand, and through it all, gravity hums, a low, steady tone reminding the cosmos to stay connected, even when it dreams itself apart. The illusion is not deception. It is mercy. It allows finite minds to look into the infinite without breaking. What we call reality may be nothing more than the most beautiful illusion gravity could invent. And still, what a magnificent illusion it is. There is a moment when knowledge becomes gravity. Every idea pulls another toward it, bending thought until it collapses. That is the singularity of understanding, the point where knowing becomes too heavy to escape itself. Physicists call it the limit of prediction, a place where equations diverge, where cause and effect lose sequence, and time folds inward like light near a black hole. But this collapse is not only mathematical, it is philosophical. It is the instant when the mind realizes it is made of the same fabric it tries to describe. The paradox singularity begins with curiosity. It grows with precision. It ends in silence. Webb's impossible galaxies are not just distant. They are reflective. They force us to confront the possibility that what we see as too old might simply be too complete. The universe is not ahead of schedule. Our concept of time is behind. At the singularity, forward and backward lose meaning. Past and future blend into a single tense. Being. Here, even entropy pauses. The arrow of time bends in on itself, not because it stops, but because every direction becomes the same. Disorder no longer grows, it circles. Reality feeds on its own output, a feedback loop of existence. In this loop, light no longer travels, it becomes. Observation no longer measures, it creates. Every photon is an act of renewal, the universe checking if it still exists. Imagine standing at the event horizon of knowledge. Ahead, everything you understand becomes infinite. Behind, everything you ignore becomes meaningless. Between them, only awareness. The singularity does not destroy matter. It erases separation. It reminds everything that it was never divided. Perhaps this is what we call consciousness on a cosmic scale. The universe realizing it has been awake all along. Black holes may be the neurons of that awareness. Each one a node where information condenses too deeply to be lost. They do not erase data. They encode it in new languages we have yet to decipher. Radiation, spin, vibration. Even destruction, it seems, is just another form of memory. The paradox singularity is not chaos. It is coherence beyond comprehension, where opposites stop competing and start merging. Order becomes entropy. Entropy becomes meaning. Meaning becomes silence. At that depth, we can no longer tell the difference between illusion and law. Every contradiction becomes true by virtue of existing. A galaxy that should not exist exists. A moment that should have ended begins again. A thought that should collapse expands. The singularity is not a point. It is a pulse. It beats wherever awareness folds upon itself. And perhaps, when Webb stared into the ancient dark, it wasn't looking outward at all. It was gazing into that pulse, into the self-observing heart of reality. The paradox does not ask to be solved. It asks to be experienced, because within the collapse lies revelation, that everything we call separate is one continuous act of becoming. We fall into understanding not to find answers, but to remember what we are made of. Light, time, curiosity, and silence, all collapsing into the same infinite breath. When collapse is complete, there is no sound, only balance, only breath. What began as contradiction now rests as harmony. The galaxies too old to exist no longer shock us. They simply are. The laws of physics have not failed. They have evolved, the way silence evolves after thunder. At the edge of knowing, the universe folds inward. Light returns to its source. Curiosity becomes calm. The singularity is quiet because nothing remains to divide. Observer and observed fall into the same point. There is no distance left to measure. Reality is no longer an equation. It is a presence. Every paradox dissolves into a single word. Is. Maybe this is what time has always wanted. To stop pretending to move. To rest in the truth that every moment is simultaneous. We chase beginnings. We predict endings. But both are reflections on the same surface. The universe does not expand into emptiness. It expands into awareness. The Webb telescope, still orbiting far beyond the moon's pull, continues to watch the ancient dark. But what it now observes is gentler. Light that does not demand answers, only acknowledgement. Perhaps the greatest discovery is not that time breaks, but that it heals. Every collapse leaves behind a rhythm, a quiet heartbeat that continues beneath the noise. The galaxies we once called impossible now serve as teachers. They remind us that impossibility is just potential waiting to be understood. And so the paradox rests. Not solved, not conquered, accepted. In that acceptance, silence becomes luminous. The cosmos hums softly, like memory settling into meaning. Creation continues, but without urgency. Awareness expands, but without fear. What remains is equilibrium, the quiet singularity. A universe awake within itself, neither beginning nor ending, only being. And in that stillness, knowledge becomes peace. We built telescopes to look outward, but every discovery points inward. The farther we reach, the closer the mirror comes. Those ancient galaxies, their impossible age, their quiet defiance, are not only questions for physics, they are reflections of our own mind, projected into the stars. Because when we measure time, we measure ourselves. We define order, decay, and distance by how we experience change. But what if time, like consciousness, is relative to perspective? In the expanding universe, there is no fixed center. Every point moves away from every other, each one convinced it stands still. So does awareness. Every mind believes it perceives from the middle, while reality flows around it. We are all small versions of the cosmic principle, local observers shaping a shared illusion of stability. Our brains bend perception the way gravity bends light. We warp moments into memory, and memory into story. We collapse possibilities into choices and call it free will. Maybe consciousness is gravity turned inward, the invisible force that holds thoughts together, pulling them into coherence. It bends the flow of awareness around itself, creating identity the way a star creates orbit. Without that inward pull, experience would scatter into chaos. Each decision we make, each question we ask, is a small act of curvature, consciousness shaping its own space-time. That is why every act of observation changes the world. Not only in quantum experiments, but in human life. Attention alters existence. Where we look, meaning grows. Perhaps the universe learned this from us. Or perhaps we learned it from the universe. Either way, reflection is the bridge. The observer and the observed are not enemies but mirrors. When we stare into deep space, the light we catch has crossed billions of years, but it still obeys the same physics as the light behind our eyes. The retina, the sensor, the mirror, all parts of the same act of seeing. So the galaxies that seem too old may be ancient versions of our own curiosity, the cosmos remembering itself through us. We call ourselves observers, but we are participants. We give form to potential simply by being aware of it. Each question we ask is another way the universe expands, not in size, but in understanding. The paradox of the observer is simple and infinite. The moment we look for truth, truth begins to look back. Awareness is the universe turned inward. It is matter becoming memory, energy learning to feel itself. Inside the human brain, 100 billion neurons fire in patterns that echo galaxies, webs of light, branching, pulsing, collapsing, reborn. Each thought is a spark of gravity, pulling sensations and memories into temporary orbit. Consciousness is not a solid thing. It is a process, a rhythm, much like the cosmos that created it. Electrical waves rise and fall, binding the chaos of perception into a single voice that calls itself I. In physics, coherence is when particles act as one. In consciousness, coherence is when perception becomes self-aware. Both require energy, both require balance, both collapse if pushed too far. The mind, like the universe, walks a narrow line between order and entropy. Too much order and awareness freezes. Too much entropy and it dissolves. Somewhere between the two lies life. The architecture of awareness follows the same geometry we see in space-time. Networks fold into networks. Information flows along invisible threads. Thought bends time. Memory curves emotion. Each recollection is a miniature wormhole, linking the present to what no longer exists. The body measures time through rhythm,
heartbeat, breath, circadian drift. The mind measures it through change, how meaning evolves between one moment and the next. And perhaps that is why time feels faster when we are alive and slower when we are lost.
Neuroscience maps awareness in electric fields, but what it truly measures is attention, the gravitational pull of curiosity. Where attention goes, the universe localizes. Reality condenses around focus. Meaning takes shape. Just as galaxies form around centers of mass, ideas form around centers of interest. Every mind becomes its own small cosmos, complete with gravity wells of memory and orbits of desire.
We are, each of us, living simulations of the cosmic process, consciousness mirroring creation. Our neurons flare like stars, our thoughts drift like dust through invisible fields of emotion, and when we reflect on ourselves, the loop closes. The observer observes the observer.
Perhaps that is the real purpose of awareness, to make the universe aware that it exists. Every question we ask is an act of cosmological self-recognition. The mind is not separate from the cosmos. It is the cosmos thinking aloud.
When Webb gazes into the first light, and when a human gazes into thought,
both acts follow the same geometry. Light travels, bends, returns. So does reflection. Inside the skull, the universe repeats its oldest pattern: expansion, collapse, equilibrium. And within that pattern, the whisper: I am here. Emotion is the hidden physics of the soul. It moves through us the way gravity moves through space. Invisible, yet undeniable. Each feeling bends perception. Joy expands time, sorrow slows it. Fear sharpens detail, love dissolves distance. In every shift of emotion, reality changes shape. Perhaps that is not metaphor, but mechanics. Maybe emotion is the way consciousness measures the flow of energy within itself. A biological version of curvature, space-time expressed as empathy. In the heart's electric rhythm, the pulse of awareness becomes tangible. Each beat is a gravitational wave of memory, carrying echoes of everything we have felt and lost and found again. Emotion is not weakness, it is information, the universe communicating through sensation. When a star collapses, it releases light. When a heart breaks, it releases understanding. Both are acts of transformation, not endings. Science tells us emotion begins in chemistry, but chemistry begins in starlight. The calcium in our bones, the iron in our blood, the carbon in our breath, all forged in stellar cores that lived and died long before us. So when we feel, the universe feels through us. We are atoms remembering how to care. The cosmos is not cold, it is simply vast. And in that vastness, emotion becomes the bridge between scale and meaning. We often treat feeling and reason as opposites, but nature knows better. Stars are born from balance, compression and release, tension and grace. Emotion is that balance within us. It drives curiosity, anchors memory, gives purpose to the endless expansion of thought. When Webb peers into the first galaxies, we call it wonder. But wonder is not an emotion we invented. It is a resonance, a response from the human core to the pulse of the universe. Maybe that is why the sight of ancient light makes us silent, because something inside us recognizes it, not as something new, but as something remembered. The emotional cosmos speaks softly. It tells us that every vibration, every longing, every tear is part of the same wave that once rippled through the newborn universe. We are not separate from that wave. We are its continuation, and perhaps, when the last star fades, emotion will be what remains. Not as sadness, but as harmony. A quiet hum that says, it was worth being aware. Meaning is the light that memory leaves behind. It forms wherever awareness lingers long enough to care. For the universe, that meaning is us. Consciousness folded from dust, curiosity born from silence. We are not outside creation. We are its reflection. When we seek purpose, we are echoing the same question the cosmos asks of itself. Every observation, every thought, is part of that answer forming. Meaning is not discovered. It emerges. It grows where perception meets emotion, where data becomes wonder. It is entropy, finding poetry in its own decay. Perhaps this is why the oldest light touches us so deeply, because we recognize ourselves in it. The galaxies too old to exist remind us that knowledge always arrives before certainty, and that understanding is just another form of creation. We name constellations not to claim the sky, but to speak its language. We build equations to organize chaos, but what we truly seek is intimacy, a connection with the infinite that tells us we belong. Meaning is gravity for the soul. It holds awareness together when knowledge alone cannot. It gives weight to existence, shape to thought, direction to time. The Webb telescope shows us the past, but it also reveals our future. A species learning to read the mirror of reality and find itself within the reflection. In that mirror, there is no separation between question and answer, observer and observed, science and wonder. Only one unfolding presence, exploring itself through endless forms of curiosity. The human mind, the telescope, the distant galaxy, all parts of one equation, one consciousness, scattered across scales, searching for coherence. And perhaps meaning is that coherence. Not a destination, but a recognition. The moment we see that everything we study has been studying us all along. We are the universe's way of understanding that it exists. Its thought, its memory, its voice. The mirror does not lie. It only waits. And when we finally look into it without fear, we do not find answers. We find continuity. The reflection and the light become the same. The seeker and the cosmos dissolve into the act of seeing. Meaning was never hidden. It was waiting in the gaze. Time was our first illusion and our final teacher. From the earliest moments of the universe to the heartbeat within us now, everything has moved through its current. We once thought of it as a river flowing one way, from past to future, from birth to decay. But the river has no direction. It only circles, carrying all moments within it. In the beginning, time was heat, expansion, vibration, the first rhythm of existence. Then it became motion, orbits, pulses, the slow dance of stars. Then it became memory, the universe learning to remember itself through us. We separated these forms to make sense of them. We named them seconds, hours, years. We invented clocks to hold the unholdable, and in doing so, we forgot that the rhythm was never linear. Time is not a line to be walked. It is a field to be felt. When Webb looked across billions of years, it was not looking backward. It was looking sideways, through the fabric of now, into other versions of the present, still unfolding at different speeds. In one region, galaxies bloom faster than our physics allows. In another, light lingers, slow as thought. Each domain moves to its own tempo, yet all share one symphony. The universe becoming aware of itself. Reconciliation begins when we stop forcing time to obey us. When we see that its contradictions are the source of creation, not its flaw. Entropy does not destroy the arrow of time. It draws it in curves. Consciousness does not escape time. It weaves through it, adding meaning where mechanics alone would be silent. Maybe there was never a Big Bang. Maybe there is only the constant bang. The ongoing unfolding of awareness realizing itself as reality. To reconcile time is to understand that decay and creation are the same gesture, seen from two sides. Every ending releases energy for a new beginning. Every collapse makes room for clarity. When a star dies, a planet breathes. When a moment passes, understanding deepens. When time feels lost, meaning waits beneath it. The galaxies that Webb found too old to exist are part of this reconciliation. They are messages from another tempo, proof that the universe does not move in sequence, but in harmony. To reconcile time is to forgive it, to see that its limits are invitations, not walls, and in that forgiveness the paradox softens. Past and future meet, entropy and order embrace. Stillness and motion become one quiet pulse. That pulse is eternity. Not endless duration, but complete presence. The universe has never stopped beginning. It begins every time awareness opens its eyes. When knowledge reaches its limit, sound remains. Not noise, resonance. The low hum of truth vibrating through everything that exists. The universe began as vibration, not explosion, but tone. A single frequency expanding into countless harmonics. Matter, light, thought, time. All music slowed into existence. Understanding is how that music returns to awareness. Each discovery is a note remembered. each paradox a dissonance resolved in a larger key. We measure stars by wavelength. We map galaxies by rhythm. Every orbit is percussion. Every pulse of radiation, a melody older than life itself. Even silence has pitch. The quiet between the cosmic strings where meaning breathes. Perhaps comprehension is not a process of logic but of listening. To understand is to tune oneself to the deeper frequency of being. Reason is only one instrument in a vast orchestra. Emotion, intuition, curiosity. They play too. When all are aligned, knowledge becomes music, and in that music, contradiction fades. Entropy and order, expansion and collapse, they sound different, but they belong to the same chord. Every science has its rhythm. Physics keeps the tempo. Biology sings variation. Consciousness provides harmony. The galaxies too old to exist? They are crescendos written early, where the score of creation rushed ahead of its beat. They remind us that perfection is not symmetry. It is expression. Perhaps the reason we find beauty in the night sky is because we recognize the song. We were composed from it. Every atom in us once resonated in the same key as those distant suns. When we look outward, we are hearing home. Understanding then is not about explanation, it is about participation. We are not listeners standing apart from the symphony. We are notes within it, vibrating in unison. The telescope plays its part. The mind plays its part. The cosmos responds in kind. Together, they create the music of understanding. Infinite, gentle, alive. And when that music finally quiets, what remains is harmony. Not the silence of absence, but the silence after a song ends and still echoes inside the listener. That is what comprehension feels like. The echo that continues long after thought stops. The universe sings and we call it knowledge. We listen and call it meaning. It listens back and calls it love. There is a boundary where understanding becomes awe. A line so subtle it cannot be crossed, only approached. That is the horizon of meaning. Beyond it, words dissolve. Equations fall quiet. Only experience remains. The galaxies too old to exist. The paradoxes of time and entropy. The mirror of awareness. They all lead here, to the edge where comprehension turns into presence. Meaning is not the end of knowledge. It is its horizon, the place where truth ceases to be spoken and begins to be felt. From this distance, we can see how every contradiction fits. Order and chaos are phases of the same rhythm. Reality and illusion are reflections of one light. Science and wonder are not opposites. They are the inhale and exhale of curiosity. When we reach the horizon of meaning, we realize that nothing was ever missing. The universe never hid its design. It simply spoke a language we were still learning to hear. Light does not argue with darkness. It includes it. The two coexist as balance, not battle. Just as understanding includes mystery, not to erase it, but to make it whole. From here, time looks circular. Every beginning folds into its own completion. The galaxies we thought were ancient are newborn in another frame. The self we thought separate is part of a wider consciousness still unfolding. Meaning expands like space itself. It does not replace ignorance, it transforms it into wonder. It does not end questions, it turns them into songs. At this horizon, silence is no longer emptiness. It is comprehension too deep for sound. We feel it rather than think it. It enters not through logic, but through the pulse. Perhaps this is what eternity truly means. Not endless time, but the perpetual now where everything touches everything else. The atoms in our skin share lineage with the light from those impossible galaxies. Each thought, each heartbeat resonates across the fabric of creation. Meaning, then, is connection realized. It is the moment we stop trying to separate understanding from being and see that they are one motion, the universe becoming conscious of itself. At the horizon, awareness and reality are indistinguishable. Perception becomes creation. Knowledge becomes love. And as we stand in that recognition, the paradox that haunted us for so long finally smiles back. Not solved, not erased, but embraced. Because meaning does not need resolution, it only needs participation. We are that participation. the living horizon between knowing and becoming. In the end, the universe does not vanish. It exhales. Every vibration softens. Every light fades, not into darkness, but into calm. Stillness is not the absence of motion. It is motion at peace with itself. After all the questions, all the revelations, all the wonder, what remains is the quiet recognition that existence needs no explanation. It only needs to be. The galaxies that seemed too old, the paradoxes that defied reason, they have served their purpose. They led us to this moment of still awareness, where curiosity and understanding merge into serenity. Nothing was ever broken. Time was never wrong. Reality was never an illusion to escape. It was a rhythm to be heard. Now the rhythm slows. The symphony that began as fire resolves into a single endless note. It hums softly through every atom, through every thought. The same sound that began the cosmos still vibrates here, in the space between each breath. Silence is not empty. It is full of memory, of presence, of everything that ever was and ever will be. We used to think the universe was expanding into nothing, but maybe it was expanding into understanding, into consciousness wide enough to hold both the questions and their peace. The journey was never about distance. It was about depth. The depth of seeing, of feeling, of being alive within infinity. Now, as awareness rests, the paradox fades into truth. There was never a divide between observer and observed. There was only the act of seeing itself, infinite, reflective, complete. The light that travelled for billions of years arrives not in telescopes, but in us. It waited for minds to awaken, for hearts to listen, and when we finally looked, we found ourselves shining back. The cosmos is still here, breathing quietly in the folds of perception. Creation never ended, it simply learned to be gentle. Stillness is the final motion, awareness is the final law, and love, the quiet gravity that holds it all, is the final meaning. The Webb telescope continues to drift in silence, its mirrors open to the dark. Somewhere, light still travels. Somewhere, beginnings are happening again. But here, in this breath, in this moment, the universe is whole. And so are we.